Look at all my treasures! So many beautiful colors! Come and see! Grandpa, look what I found!
Oh, how wonderful! Let's see, my dear.
Here you go!
Thank you.
Everyone, listen. We must act now.
What is it? What's wrong?
Trouble is coming. We have to leave.
Baba, can I go play now?
Yes, my dear, but stay close to the market.
I will!
This is not what we agreed upon.
But it is the best offer for the village.
We must discuss this further.
You won't believe the tale I'm about to tell you. It's a story that has been whispered in villages for generations, one of cleverness, greed, and a twist of fate that no one saw coming. In a small, sun-drenched village, not far from the rolling hills and sparkling rivers, there lived a girl whose hunger for more was as big as the sky above her. People called her greedy, not just a little greedy, but someone who would gobble up anything that came her way without a second thought. And when it came to her bride price, oh, she made sure every cow, every bag of millet, every shiny bead went straight into her hands. From the very first day she could speak, she knew how to ask for things, and not just ask, she demanded. Neighbors would shake their heads when they saw her counting coins in secret or sneaking extra gifts from visitors, and elders would sigh, warning anyone who would listen, "Be careful who you marry, her appetite is endless." Yet the girl only laughed. She thought the world existed to fill her pockets, her belly, and her dreams of wealth. Marriage, to her, was not about love or companionship. It was a chance to gain more than anyone else had ever dared. It all started when suitors from nearby villages began arriving at her father's compound. Young men with strong backs and proud families, carrying generous offers, hoping to win her hand. And each time she found ways to squeeze more out of them. If one offered 5 cows, she wanted 7. If another brought a jar of palm oil, she demanded 2. No one ever said no, not because they were weak, but because everyone feared being on the wrong side of her cunning smile. Her beauty was undeniable, her charm irresistible, and her cleverness unmatched. But behind all of that glitter and grace was a hunger that could not be tamed. Stories of her antics spread beyond the village. Travelers passing through would whisper about the girl who ate up her bride price shamelessly, who laughed while counting the treasures her future husband brought, who would never stop until she got exactly what she wanted. And yet, despite all the warnings, one young man finally stepped forward. He was different from the rest, quiet, observant, and carrying with him an air of mystery. Unlike the others, he did not seem intimidated by her antics. Instead, he watched, patiently waiting for the moment to reveal who he really was. The villagers watched with bated breath. Who was this man, they wondered? What would he do when faced with the girl who had taken so much from everyone else? Would he fall into her trap like all the others, or would he finally be the one to match her cunning? The girl, of course, had no idea that someone like him could even exist. In her mind, she was untouchable. Every gift, every cow, every fine cloth she demanded, she believed, would be hers to take. And take she did, with a grin that made some uneasy and others envious. The air in the village was thick with curiosity and tension. Children peered through windows, trying to catch a glimpse of the lavish gifts and the piles of coins she greedily collected. The elders shook their heads, worried about what such greed could do to a young woman's heart. And the suitors who had been rejected earlier could only watch in silence, wondering if this mysterious man would finally teach her a lesson she had never learned before. There was excitement in every corner, a quiet anticipation that something big was about to happen. And then, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery orange and deep purple, the girl and this new suitor finally came face to face. She looked at him with her usual confident smile, certain she would extract yet another treasure from him, just as she had with all the others. But there was something in his gaze that made her pause, even if only for a moment. It was calm, unshaken, and oddly unafraid. He didn't fumble with gifts or flinch at her demands. He simply smiled back, a smile that hinted he knew more than he let on, a smile that promised that the game had only just begun. Little did she know, this man had his own clever ways, his own secrets that could turn her world upside down. For the first time she felt a twinge of uncertainty, a flutter in her heart that wasn't about money or jewels. It was something entirely new, something that made her pause and reconsider. Could it be that she had finally met her match? Could it be that this suitor, quiet and steady, might be the one to challenge her greed in ways she had never imagined? And just as the village held its breath, waiting for the first move, the girl reached out, ready to claim her next prize, only to discover that this time, things might not go the way she planned. What happened next? Well, that's a story for another time. But one thing was certain. The girl who thought she could eat up the world without consequence had finally met someone who could teach her that greed alone does not always win. And for the villagers, for the children peeking through the windows, and for all who had whispered about her daring ways, the question remained, would she finally learn her lesson, or would she find herself outsmarted in the most unexpected way? The village never slept quite the same after that day. Whispers traveled like wildfire along the narrow paths, from the market stalls to the riverbanks, from the dusty fields to the quiet corners of the elders' huts. Everyone was curious about the man who had arrived seemingly out of nowhere and dared to face the greedy girl without flinching. No one knew where he had come from, or why he had chosen to challenge her in such a daring way. Some said he was from a faraway village, one beyond the mountains where the rivers cut through the land like silver threads. Others claimed he carried secrets that could unravel even the cleverest of schemes. Meanwhile, the girl could not stop thinking about him. For the first time in her life, she felt a twinge of caution. She replayed their encounter over and over in her mind, imagining the calmness in his eyes and the subtle smile that had unnerved her. Her usual confidence faltered just a little, and with that faltering came curiosity. Who was he really? What could he possibly want from her besides what everyone else had offered? And why had he seemed so unbothered by her bold demands, her clever tricks, the way she had always gotten what she wanted? Her family, proud and slightly wary, noticed the change in her. She spent hours pacing the veranda, staring at the horizon, plotting her next move but always returning to the memory of the man's gaze. Her mother scolded gently, "Child, you've never met someone like him. Watch yourself. Greed has its price, and sometimes the one who stands still while the world trembles sees what others cannot." But the girl only laughed, though not as confidently as before. There was a shadow of doubt creeping in, one she didn't fully understand. As days passed, the village settled into a tense routine. The girl's usual visitors, young men hoping to win her favor, kept arriving, only to leave with less than they had intended. They whispered nervously among themselves, aware that she had set her sights on someone beyond their reach. Meanwhile, the mysterious man was never far from view. He would appear at the market without drawing attention, speaking politely with elders, observing quietly. No one had seen him accept a gift or promise a cow, yet the villagers sensed that he was quietly watching the girl, learning her patterns, anticipating her moves. The girl tried her usual tactics, sending servants to deliver requests and concocting clever schemes to gain more than her share, but the man remained unaffected. It was as if he understood her intentions before she even spoke them. One afternoon she decided to test him with a trap she had devised. A request for an impossible number of gifts, something no one had ever dared demand. She watched him carefully, expecting to see hesitation, a frown, maybe even anger. But he smiled. Not the sly, cautious smile of someone wary of her greed, but a calm, knowing smile that made her stomach twist in ways she could not name. Her mind began to race. Could this man truly be different? Was he cleverer than she had ever imagined? Or was he hiding something dangerous, something that could topple her world entirely? For the first time she realized that her usual confidence, the same confidence that had let her dominate every suitor, every visitor, every trader, was no longer enough. There was a mystery surrounding him that she could not yet unravel, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. Late at night, under the glow of a silver moon, she would sneak to the edge of the village, where the river ran cool and steady, thinking about him. She wondered about his life before he arrived, about the stories he carried with him that no one could see. Did he have a family? Was he wealthy or poor? Was he strong, clever, cunning, or all of it at once? Every answer she imagined seemed to lead to more questions, and the more she thought, the more she realized that this man was unlike anyone she had ever met. And yet, something about him drew her in. Not love, at least not yet, but fascination. A recognition that perhaps here was someone who could match her wit, someone whose cleverness was as sharp as hers, whose patience could withstand her demands, whose calm could withstand her storms. It was a strange feeling for someone used to getting everything she wanted, a feeling that unsettled her but also excited her. For the first time she felt challenged, and with challenge came a thrill she had never known. The villagers began noticing changes in her behavior. She laughed less at the other suitors, spoke more cautiously, and sometimes stared off into the distance as though expecting something extraordinary to happen. Rumors grew, as they always do, but even the elders found themselves wondering what would happen if the girl's greed finally met its match. Some said she would triumph, as she always had. Others whispered that she was about to discover that not every treasure could be claimed by cleverness alone. One day she found herself alone in the village square, staring at the quiet figure of the man across the way. He carried a bundle of things in his hands, but unlike previous visitors, he did not offer them to her. Instead, he placed them carefully at his feet, then looked directly at her, the calmness in his eyes giving nothing away. She felt a flicker of frustration. Who was he really? Why did he resist her usual charms, her clever tricks, her greed? And more importantly, what would happen next? She clenched her fists, her mind racing, her heart beating faster than it ever had when counting her pile of coins or bargaining for her bride price. Something was shifting, changing in ways she could not yet understand. The playful game she had always known was no longer so simple, and the world she had thought she controlled now seemed filled with unknown rules, hidden challenges, and a puzzle she had never before encountered. And in that moment, as she took a step toward him, ready to demand, scheme, and conquer as she always had, a strange unease settled over her. This was no ordinary suitor, no ordinary challenge. The man before her held secrets, patience, and cleverness that rivaled her own, and she had no idea what he might do next. The village held its breath, the wind whispered through the trees, and the river flowed as if carrying its own warnings. Something was coming, something that would test her in ways she had never imagined, and for the first time she wondered if she might finally meet someone who could truly match her. The village had never seen tension like this before. Every glance, every gesture, every whisper seemed to carry weight. The greedy girl, once untouchable and always in control, now found herself walking carefully through each day as if the ground could shift beneath her at any moment. She had always believed that cleverness and charm could bend the world to her will, but the mysterious man seemed impervious to both. His presence was quiet but commanding, and it unnerved her more than any angry father or rejected suitor ever had. Meanwhile, the villagers began taking sides, even without realizing it. The elders, who had long warned against her unending appetite for wealth, watched with a mix of relief and concern. Perhaps they thought, finally someone had come to teach her a lesson. But would it be the kind of lesson that helped her grow, or the kind that left her humiliated? The traders and visiting families speculated endlessly about the man's intentions. Some said he was clever, patient, even wise. Others whispered that he was cunning and dangerous, capable of outsmarting even the shrewdest girl in the region. Children followed him at a distance, curious about the quiet figure who had arrived with nothing to prove yet had somehow unsettled the most confident girl in the village. The girl, on the other hand, could not stop thinking about him. She replayed their encounters constantly, imagining the way she could challenge him, the schemes she could set, the way she could bend him to her will. But every plan seemed to meet an invisible wall. He never rushed, never flinched, never fell for a trick. If anything, he seemed to anticipate her moves, and the uncertainty that came with it made her both frustrated and fascinated. For the first time she began to question her own cleverness. Was she truly as sharp as she believed, or had she finally found someone who could match her step for step? At night, when the village was quiet and only the river sang its soft song, she would think of the many suitors she had faced in the past. Some had tried to outwit her, some had offered everything they could, but all had failed. She had always come out ahead, richer, smarter, and stronger. But now she realized that her previous victories meant nothing against this man. It was as if he existed outside the rules she had mastered, and every attempt to control or trick him only revealed her own limitations. The man, for his part, kept a careful distance. He moved through the village with purpose, speaking politely to elders, helping where he could, and observing the girl without any visible reaction to her usual antics. Yet he was not entirely passive. Sometimes he left small, mysterious gifts at the edge of her family's compound. A bundle of dried fruit, a carved wooden trinket, a simple cloth folded neatly with care. Each item seemed ordinary at first glance, but the girl quickly realized they were hints, challenges meant to provoke her curiosity, test her patience, and keep her guessing. They were riddles of a sort, and she could not resist trying to solve them. Even within the girl's own family, tension grew. Her siblings began to murmur, comparing her behavior to that of previous women in the village who had been undone by their own greed. Perhaps this one is different, one whispered. But maybe she is about to face her first real challenge. Her mother watched her closely, noticing how she lingered longer over small details, how her laughter had become quieter, more cautious. And her father, usually proud of his daughter's cleverness and charm, now found himself uneasy. For the first time, he wondered if his warnings had gone unheeded for too long, and whether the consequences might finally catch up with her. Meanwhile, the villagers began to notice smaller stories unfolding alongside the main tension. A young trader, curious about the man, tried to engage him in conversation, only to be gently but firmly redirected. A group of children, hoping to spy on the girl, found themselves drawn into her schemes unintentionally, becoming part of a puzzle they didn't fully understand. Even the village animals seemed to sense a change. Dogs barked at the man once or twice, and the goats that usually wandered freely seemed to pause when he passed. It was as if the entire village were holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation, even if no one could guess exactly how it would unfold. The girl began to notice subtle changes in herself as well. Her usual hunger for wealth was still strong, but curiosity had taken a firm hold. She wondered what the man knew that she did not, what secrets he carried, and why he refused to yield to her usual tactics. Each morning she awoke thinking of new ways to test him, new ways to assert her cleverness, yet each attempt seemed to circle back to the same unsettling realization. She was no longer the one in control. One evening, under the soft glow of the setting sun, the girl finally confronted him directly. She demanded answers, seeking to understand why he had come, what he wanted, and why he did not succumb to her usual charms. But he simply smiled, calm and unreadable, and said nothing concrete, only offering a small, cryptic gesture that seemed almost like a challenge. She could not decipher it, and the frustration it caused burned hotter than any insult she had ever endured. She realized then that she had stepped into a game far more intricate than any she had ever played before, and that the stakes were higher than she had imagined. As night fell, the village remained alive with tension. Lanterns flickered in huts, shadows stretched long across the paths, and every whisper seemed to carry meaning. The girl lay awake, thinking, planning, and wondering how she could finally gain the upper hand, or if perhaps she had already lost without realizing it. The man's presence was a constant puzzle, a quiet force that neither demanded nor submitted, leaving her restless and curious, hungry for answers she could not yet see. And so the story continued, the village caught between awe and fear, the girl caught between greed and fascination, and the man caught in his own quiet mystery. No one knew what would happen next, and every day brought new possibilities, new tensions, and new twists. Every step the girl took seemed to bring her closer to a confrontation she could neither control nor predict, while the man's calm patience suggested that when the moment finally came, it would change everything, but no one, not even her, could say how. The days that followed were filled with whispers and wonder. The villagers could feel it in the air, the sense that something was about to change, that the careful balance of cleverness, greed, and mystery was on the edge of tipping. Every glance the greedy girl cast at the mysterious man seemed charged with both challenge and curiosity. Every step she took toward gaining the upper hand was met with a calm, patient resistance that made her pulse quicken and her mind spin with ideas. She had always known how to take what she wanted, but now it seemed the world had found someone who could take it back. She tried everything she knew. One morning, she demanded a rare herd of goats from him, smiling as she expected him to hesitate or argue, as every other suitor had done. But he did not. He simply nodded, a small glimmer of amusement in his eyes, and went about his day without giving her the immediate satisfaction she craved. The girl's heart sank slightly, but her mind raced faster than ever. If this man was not moved by gifts, coins, or clever tricks, then what could reach him? And more importantly, how could she outsmart someone who seemed always one step ahead? Meanwhile, the villagers were caught in a silent frenzy. Mothers whispered to daughters about the boldness of the girl who had taken so much before, now facing her first real challenge. Young men compared notes, wondering if this mysterious visitor might finally teach her a lesson. Even the elders, who had long prepared themselves for her schemes, could only watch, wide-eyed, as the tension between the two built like a storm about to break. There was an unspoken understanding. Something significant was coming, something that might shake the village to its core. The girl's mind was a whirlwind. Every evening she would pace the veranda, replaying the day's encounters in meticulous detail. She scrutinized his gestures, his pauses, the way he watched her without fear or flattery. Each clue felt like a puzzle, each silence like a challenge. She began to notice subtle patterns in his behavior, a careful attention to detail, a quiet respect for the villagers, a calmness that masked strength. These were not weaknesses she could exploit. They were clues that he was not just clever but careful, deliberate, and perhaps even smarter than she was willing to admit. One afternoon, the man placed another small, mysterious token in front of her family's hut. It was a carved figurine, delicate and precise, unlike anything she had ever seen. She picked it up with trembling fingers, studying it for hidden meanings, for secret messages. And then she realized something. It was not just a gift. It was a warning. A test. A quiet way of saying that while she had always controlled the world around her, here was someone who could control her without lifting a finger. Her frustration and fascination grew in equal measure. The more she tried to assert her usual dominance, the more she realized that he was not reacting in predictable ways. The thrill of outsmarting a suitor, the thrill of greed and cleverness that had always driven her, now collided with fear, curiosity, and something she could not name. She began to see him not only as a challenge but as a mirror, a reflection of her own cleverness, patience, and cunning, matched step for step. The villagers began to notice the change in her demeanor. She laughed less freely and smiled with a hint of calculation. Her steps were measured, her eyes always searching, always watching. Even her family noticed that she seemed more alive in her curiosity than in her greed, more alert in her observations than in her counting of coins and gifts. And the man remained calm, almost invisible at times, watching her reactions, understanding her strategies, letting the tension grow. Then came the evening that no one would forget. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deep reds and purples, and the village square was quiet, almost tense with anticipation. The girl had set her most daring scheme yet. She had gathered the rarest gifts she could, preparing to corner the man with an impossible demand, confident that this time she would finally assert control. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last, every breath heavier as she moved toward him, the eyes of the village upon her, waiting to see what would unfold. He stood calmly watching her approach. He did not flinch. He did not smile in the usual way. There was a depth in his gaze now, a quiet acknowledgement that this was not a simple game. He knew what she was attempting, understood the layers of her plan, and waited with a patience that made the girl's heart pound faster than she had ever felt. Every movement, every glance between them felt like a battle, a dance, a silent war where no words were spoken, yet everything was understood. The villagers watched in stunned silence. Children pressed close to the walls, whispering excitedly. Elders exchanged uneasy glances. Even the animals seemed to sense the tension, standing still, listening to the air as if it carried its own warnings. This was not a simple conflict over gifts or coins, not even a battle of wit alone. It was something larger, something that had been building for weeks, reaching a peak that no one could predict. As she extended her hand, offering her most daring demand yet, the man's eyes met hers, calm and unyielding. A hush fell over the village. The wind stirred the trees and rustled the leaves, carrying a whisper of anticipation. Every heartbeat in that square seemed synchronized, waiting, holding, suspended in the moment before the inevitable clash. The girl realized that nothing she had done before had prepared her for this. This was a test of more than cleverness or greed, it was a test of patience, judgment, and the ability to face someone who might finally be her equal. And then, as her words hovered on the edge of the evening air, as the village held its breath, and as the river murmured softly in the distance, a single thought struck her. This moment could change everything she had ever known. Just as the girl thought she had finally understood the mysterious man, the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet in ways she could not have imagined. The village, so quiet a moment ago, suddenly hummed with movement and whispers. From the far edge of the square, a rider appeared, kicking up dust as he approached. His arrival was sudden, unexpected, and the villagers stopped in their tracks, unsure who he was or why he had come. Even the girl, who had faced countless suitors and challenges before, felt her confidence waver. This was something she had not planned for. The rider dismounted quickly, carrying a letter sealed with a symbol that made even the elders gasp. The mysterious man's calm gaze shifted slightly, just enough for her to notice. He reached for the letter, but the girl, acting on impulse, darted forward, snatching it from his hands. The seal broke under her fingers, and she unfolded the parchment with a mix of triumph and curiosity. Her eyes scanned the words, and for the first time in days, she felt the kind of unease that had nothing to do with gifts or wealth. The letter revealed something startling. The man she had been trying to outwit was not just any visitor to the village. He carried a secret mission, one that involved not just cleverness or patience, but the fate of nearby villages and families. The words hinted that he had been sent to uncover truths, to challenge those whose greed threatened balance, and to test cleverness in ways the girl had never imagined. The implications were staggering. Suddenly, her usual games seemed small, almost foolish in comparison to the forces at play. The villagers noticed the change in her expression and whispered among themselves. "What is it? Has she discovered something dangerous?" asked one mother, clutching her daughter's hand. "Could this stranger have powers beyond what we thought?" wondered an elder. Children peeked from behind fences, sensing the tension that now stretched far beyond the simple contest of gifts and bride price. The girl, usually so focused on her own advantage, now realized that the stakes were far higher than she had ever imagined. The man stepped forward calmly, his presence unshaken despite the sudden revelation. He spoke, and his voice carried through the square, steady and deliberate. "This is no ordinary challenge," he said, his gaze locked on the girl. "What we are part of is bigger than wealth or cleverness. There are truths here that must be faced, choices that will define more than a single village." His words were carefully measured, but the tension in the air thickened as everyone realized that the conflict had grown beyond what they had expected. The girl's mind raced. She had always thrived on control, on turning situations to her advantage, but now she was faced with uncertainty that even her sharpest wit could not immediately resolve. Could she still assert dominance? Could she still claim her prize, or had she stumbled into something much larger, something where cleverness alone might not be enough? The thrill that had once driven her now mixed with fear and fascination, creating a storm she could neither predict nor fully contain. At the same time, subtle signs of the man's deeper intentions became clear. He did not react when she tried to trick him with false moves, he did not take offense when she made bold claims, and he even seemed to anticipate her strategies without effort. Every gesture, every calm smile, hinted at a knowledge far beyond what the girl had encountered in anyone else. And yet, he did not act aggressively or demand obedience. Instead, he played his role with patience, leaving her both unsettled and intrigued. Then came the second twist, the one that sent shivers through her spine. From the direction of the river, a group of villagers arrived, carrying news of stolen goods from neighboring villages and whispers of betrayal that no one had suspected. The girl realized that her own reputation for greed, her past schemes and manipulations, could now have consequences far beyond her village. The game she thought she controlled was no longer just between her and the mysterious man, it was entangled with a network of events she could barely understand, and every move she made now carried heavier stakes. She stared at the man, who remained calm, almost unreadable, and realized that he knew more than he let on. Every gesture of his, every calculated step, was now layered with new meaning. Her usual tricks seemed inadequate, her charm insufficient, and her hunger for advantage suddenly felt exposed in ways she had never experienced. The audience, the villagers, the children, even the elders, watched silently, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold, though no one could predict who would emerge ahead, or if anyone would at all. The girl felt a surge of determination. If this man thought she could be outwitted or intimidated, she would show him that her cleverness and hunger could rise to any challenge. She began plotting rapidly, weighing risks and imagining bold moves that could reclaim control. But deep inside, a quiet thought gnawed at her. Perhaps this time she had met not just her match but someone, or something, that could turn the rules of her world completely upside down. As the sun sank further below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of blood orange and violet, the girl and the man faced each other across the square. Every heartbeat, every breath, every whisper of the wind seemed magnified. The stakes had grown beyond simple greed or cleverness. Now, every choice, every word, every action had potential consequences that neither of them could yet see. The villagers held their collective breath, the animals froze in quiet unease, and the river flowed like a secret witness to the tension that had built to a breaking point. And in that charged silence, as the girl squared her shoulders and prepared to take her next move, she realized that the story she had lived, and the game she had played, were only the beginning. The true challenge had arrived, and it was far bigger, far more complex, and far more dangerous than anything she had ever imagined. Her mind raced, her pulse quickened, and for the first time she felt the thrill and fear of a game where the outcome was entirely uncertain, and where even a clever girl might find herself tested in ways she could never predict. Absolutely. Here's the climactic section of your story, resolving the main conflicts while keeping suspense and ending with an unexpected twist. I've kept it human-centric, engaging, and SEO-friendly. The village square was silent as the girl stepped forward, her chest rising and falling with anticipation. She had spent countless days planning, scheming, and testing the mysterious man, but now, face to face, she realized this was no longer a game of wealth or cunning alone. The tension between them crackled in the air like a storm about to break, and every villager held their breath, watching the two forces finally collide. The girl's eyes, sharp and calculating, met his calm, unwavering gaze, and for the first time she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. She made her move the boldest yet. With a commanding voice, she demanded that he reveal his intentions, to declare whether he had come as a friend, a judge, or a rival. The mysterious man stepped closer, his expression unreadable, and for a moment nothing happened. Time seemed to stretch, the wind stilling, the river whispering softly in the distance. Then he spoke, and his words carried the power of truth, patience, and something deeper the girl had not expected. "I have come to test you," he said, "not just for your cleverness, not just for your greed, but to see whether you are ready to face consequences that come from choices made without care. You have taken, demanded, and manipulated, but the world is larger than what you can see. The challenge has always been more than the gifts, more than the bride price. It has been about character, about judgment, about knowing when to step back as well as when to step forward." The girl's jaw tightened, her mind racing. She had never been confronted like this, never faced someone who could see past her tricks, her schemes, her hunger. For a long moment, she considered denying everything, asserting her usual dominance. But then she noticed something subtle in the man's eyes, an expectation, yes, but also a strange patience, as if he was giving her a choice: continue on her old path or step into a new way of being. In that moment, the girl made a decision. She took a deep breath and for the first time in her life, admitted aloud that she had been greedy, that she had taken more than her share, and that her cleverness had often been used only for herself. The villagers gasped, unable to believe what they were hearing. Even her family looked on in awe and relief. The confession was her first step toward balance, toward understanding that cleverness without wisdom could only go so far. The mysterious man nodded slowly, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Acknowledgement is the beginning," he said. "But every choice has consequences. You must show that you are ready to act differently, to give as much as you take, to measure cleverness with fairness." Then, with a subtle gesture, he returned the gifts she had amassed over the weeks, not to claim them, but to challenge her to decide what to do with them. The girl realized that her greatest test was not in taking, but in giving wisely, and that the real power had been in her hands all along. The villagers watched as the girl, still trembling with excitement and fear, carefully distributed some of her gifts to the poor and needy, shared some with families she had once looked down upon, and kept a portion for her family. With each act, the tension seemed to lift, replaced by admiration and respect. For the first time, the villagers saw her cleverness paired with wisdom, her charm tempered with compassion, and her hunger guided by understanding. The challenge that had dominated the village for weeks had finally reached its turning point. Just when it seemed the story had reached a satisfying resolution, the mysterious man spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "You have grown, but growth often comes with surprises." He reached into his cloak and revealed a small, folded scroll. The girl opened it and her eyes widened in shock. The scroll contained a map, an invitation to a journey far beyond the village, into lands she had never imagined, filled with new challenges and cleverness that would test her in ways she had never known. The realization hit her. This was not the end, but a beginning, and the lessons she had learned here were only the first of many she would face. The village erupted with whispers, excitement, and awe. The girl's cleverness had been matched and reshaped, her greed transformed into discernment, and yet the twist reminded everyone that the story was far from over. The mysterious man, calm and collected as ever, waited for her decision. The girl, heart pounding, smiled, this time not with greed, but with anticipation, ready to face a new challenge that promised greater rewards and deeper tests than any bride price or clever trick could ever offer. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the village in shades of gold and violet, the girl took a deep breath, the map clutched in her hand. She had faced her match, confronted her greed, and embraced the unknown, but the journey ahead was a mystery she could not yet fully grasp. And in that moment, the villagers realized that sometimes the greatest adventures, and the greatest lessons, begin when you think the story is over. The village square slowly came back to life after the long silence that followed the girl's decision. People began murmuring to each other again, some smiling, some still shaking their heads in disbelief. The girl who had once been known across the villages as the greedy girl who ate up every bride price without shame was now standing in the middle of the square holding a map that pointed to something much bigger than wealth. For a moment she simply stood there, feeling the evening breeze brush across her face as if the world itself was asking her what she would do next. Her mother was the first to step forward. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pride. "Sometimes," she said softly, "a person must face their own reflection before they can see clearly." The girl nodded slowly. For the first time, she realized how many people had watched her grow, how many had worried about the path she had been walking. She had always believed her cleverness made her powerful, but she now understood that cleverness without wisdom had only made her restless. The mysterious man stood quietly nearby, giving her space to think. The villagers watched him with curiosity. Many of them still wondered who he really was. Some believed he was simply a traveler with a sharp mind. Others whispered that he had been sent by elders from distant communities to test people whose choices were affecting others. Whatever the truth was, his calm presence had changed the course of the girl's story. The girl looked down at the gifts she had gathered over time: cows promised by hopeful suitors, beads, cloth, jars of oil, baskets of grain. These things had once made her feel victorious. Now they felt like reminders of how much she had taken without thinking about balance. One by one, she continued sharing them with families who needed them. A widow received a basket of grain. A struggling farmer was given a goat. Children who had once watched her with curiosity now smiled as they carried small bundles home to their families. The act of giving surprised her. Instead of feeling like she was losing something, she felt lighter. The villagers noticed it too. The greedy girl who once guarded every coin now laughed easily as she helped people pack their gifts. Even the elders, who had often spoken warnings about her behavior, exchanged approving glances. As night slowly settled over the village, lanterns began to glow along the narrow paths. The square that had once been tense now felt warm and peaceful. The mysterious man finally stepped closer again. His calm eyes met hers, and this time there was no challenge between them, only understanding. "You faced the test," he said gently. "Not by proving you were the cleverest, but by learning when to change." The girl smiled, though she still had questions. "Will you stay in the village?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "My path continues elsewhere. There are many places where people are still learning the balance between taking and giving." He glanced at the map in her hand. "But your path is yours to choose." She looked down at the map again. The lines drawn across it led far beyond the fields she had known all her life. They passed rivers, forests, and distant hills she had only heard about in stories. A few days earlier she might have seen it only as another opportunity to gain something. Now she saw it as something different, a chance to grow, to understand the world beyond her village, and perhaps to help others the way she had been helped. Around them, the villagers slowly returned to their homes, still talking about everything that had happened. The story would be told for years to come. The tale of the greedy girl who thought she could outsmart everyone, and the mysterious man who calmly showed her a different path. Children would repeat it around fires, and elders would remind young listeners that cleverness is powerful, but wisdom is what truly guides a person. Before leaving the square, the girl walked to the riverbank where she had often gone to think during the past few weeks. The moon reflected softly on the water. She remembered the nights when she had stood there plotting ways to win more gifts and outwit more suitors. Those memories felt distant now, like echoes of a younger version of herself. When she returned to the village path, the mysterious man was preparing to leave. He mounted his horse and looked back one last time. The girl raised the map slightly, smiling with determination. "I think," she said, "this is only the beginning of my story." The man nodded. "The best stories usually are." With that, he rode off into the quiet night road, disappearing beyond the trees. The girl stood watching until the sound of hooves faded into the distance. She felt no anger, no need to chase after him. Instead she felt something new: gratitude. In the days that followed, life in the village settled into a calmer rhythm. The girl continued helping where she could, using her clever mind in ways that benefited others. People still remembered her old reputation, but now they spoke about how she had changed. And sometimes when travelers passed through, they would hear the story of the greedy girl who once devoured every bride price, until she met someone who challenged her to look deeper. The girl kept the map safely folded in her home. She knew one day she would follow its path, but she also knew she had already begun the most important journey, the journey of learning who she truly wanted to become. And so the story ended not with riches or victory, but with something far more lasting. The lesson that greed may fill a person's hands for a moment, but wisdom, patience, and generosity are what truly shape a life. In the quiet African village where it all began, people would remember that lesson for generations, passing it along as a reminder that sometimes the greatest change begins when someone finally meets their match.